The defendant cannot speak, he cannot breathe, and he cannot plead for mercy, because he has been dead for 7 months. Imagine stepping into the Basilica of St. John Lateran in Rome. It is the year 897. The air is thick with incense, but it fails to mask the sickening, sweet stench of rotting flesh. You look towards the altar, expecting to see a holy ceremony. Instead, you see a nightmare. Sitting on the papal throne is a corpse. The skin is turning black and peeling away from the bone. It is dressed in heavy gold robes. A crown is perched on its skeletal head, and its dead, hollow eyes stare blankly into the darkness. Standing over him is a living pope, screaming in rage, shaking his fist at the silent skeleton. This is not a scene from a horror movie. This is a real historical event known as the Cadaver Synod, the day the Catholic Church put a dead man on trial. How did the holiest city on earth descend into such madness? To find out, we must dig up the past, quite literally. Welcome to the Dark Ages. Specifically, the Saeculum Obscurum, the dark century of the Papacy. It was a time when the Vatican was not a house of prayer, but a slaughterhouse of politics. In late 9th century Italy, becoming pope was a death sentence. Pontiffs were poisoned, strangled, or starved to death in dungeons. The throne of St. Peter was a prize fought over by ruthless warlords and corrupt aristocratic families. And in this Game of Thrones, no one played harder than Pope Formosus, the man whose body is now rotting on the throne. Pope Formosus was a brilliant man, but he made a fatal mistake. He betrayed the most dangerous woman in Italy, Queen Agiltrude of the House of Spoleto. Formosus had secretly invited a German army to invade Rome to break the Spoleto family's grip on power. But before the war could finish, Formosus died seemingly of natural causes, though poison was whispered in the streets. He was buried with honor. But Queen Agiltrude was not satisfied. Death was too easy an escape. She wanted him to suffer. Using her immense power, she installed a puppet on the papal throne, Pope Stephen VI. Stephen was a man unhinged by hatred and paranoia. He was willing to do the unthinkable to please his masters. He ordered the unthinkable. Dig him up! The scene in the Vatican crypts was horrific. Soldiers smashed open the stone sarcophagus. The body of Formosus had been decomposing in the damp earth for over half a year. The smell was so overpowering that the gravediggers reportedly gagged and retched as they worked. They hauled the limp, putrefying body out of the grave. But they didn't just drag him to court. They dressed him. In a grotesque mockery, they forced the stiff, rotting limbs into the sacred pontifical vestments. They put the papal ring on his finger bone. They carried him into the basilica and propped him onto the throne. Because the corpse could not sit up, a terrified teenage deacon was forced to crouch beside the throne, holding the dead pope upright, shaking with fear as the trial began. The trial itself was pure insanity. Pope Stephen VI acted as both prosecutor and judge. He paced back and forth, screaming at the silent skull, "When you were Bishop of Porto, why did you usurp the universal Roman See in such a spirit of ambition?" The corpse, of course, said nothing. The young deacon, trying to speak for the dead, stuttered in terror. Stephen became more and more unhinged, accusing the skeleton of perjury and violating church law. The verdict was never in doubt. Formosus was found guilty on all counts. But the true horror was the punishment. Stephen ordered the damnatio memoria, the total erasure of memory. Stephen commanded the executioner to step forward. He grabbed the skeletal right hand of Formosus, the hand that had blessed thousands of people. With a sickening crunch, the executioner hacked off the 3 fingers used for blessings. Stephen declared that every ordination Formosus had ever performed was void. In an instant, thousands of priests in Rome were told their priesthood was fake. The church plunged into chaos. The corpse was then stripped of its robes. Now just a naked, battered skeleton. Formosus was dragged by his feet through the corridors, down the stone steps, and through the mud of the Roman streets. The mob cheered as the former vicar of Christ was tossed into a pauper's grave like common garbage. But Stephen was not done. Paranoia consumed him. He had the body dug up again and thrown into the Tiber River. But this is where the story turns. Legend says the body did not sink. It washed up on the riverbank where it was found by a monk. Rumors spread that the statues of saints in the church had bowed as the body passed. The people of Rome began to whisper that God was angry. And perhaps he was. During the trial, a violent earthquake shook the basilica, cracking the walls. The Romans, superstitious and terrified, saw this as a divine sign. They had had enough. A violent uprising exploded in Rome. The mob stormed the Vatican, seizing Pope Stephen. Stephen VI, the man who judged the dead, met a gruesome end. He was stripped of his power, thrown into a dungeon, and strangled to death by his own guards. He had ruled for only a year. The body of Formosus was eventually returned to St. Peter's Basilica with full honors. The Cadaver Synod remains a dark stain on history, a chilling reminder that power can drive men to madness. It teaches us a final lesson. You can kill a man. You can even desecrate his grave, but you cannot escape the judgment of history.